Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith. Will be conducting our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. SpaceX is tracking the liftoff time for the second launch attempt for the RRT-1 mission off of Pad 40, coming up at 7:51 p.m. Eastern, 0051 UTC for our friends around the world. We are supported with this mission tonight, of course, by our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, who's running the technical operations of the broadcast. Our photographers, Adam Bernstein, Michael Kane, out and about getting ready to do some photography of this rocket, and Adam, of course, standing behind our tracking camera as well. If you'd like to follow the fellows on their social channels, you can find them over on X. Adam is at ABurnNYC, Michael Kane at MD Kane Jr. While you're over there, be sure to follow Spaceflight Now, simply at Spaceflight Now. You can also find us on Threads, Blue Sky, and Facebook. We'll also have tracking support with this launch tonight from our friends Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions, as well as Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images. As we're counting down T-minus 57 minutes, 25 seconds, and counting. I want to thank our wonderful moderators in the live chat for helping us out tonight. I see Aussie Space Girl, Callistia Lee, Astro Joe, all checking in. Good evening to the three of you. And if any of the other mods do happen to stop on by, be sure to give them a big ol' hello as they cruise on in. Also want to thank the more than 1,600 of you who are joining us at the top of the broadcast here. Appreciate you being with us on a somewhat soggy Monday evening here on Florida's Space Coast. We'll talk a little bit more about the weather in just a few minutes here, but if you haven't already, you could do us a huge favor just by hitting the like button, allowing more folks to find this live coverage as we continue on through the count. We're also powered by a wonderful channel member community here on YouTube that makes these live launch opportunities possible. So thanks to folks like Sharon Walker, Patty Chichil, Sulfur for Lunch, The Rocket Girl, Reiki B, Tara TJ007, Joni Mahoney, and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, that is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos, as well as our Discord server. And, of course, the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments here at the Cape in 4K. Speaking of channel members, I want to welcome in Sandy Robson, our newest channel member, joining us at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard, Sandy. We're glad to have you with us. Last but not least, if you have a comment or question about this mission or other things happening in the realm of spaceflight, or you just want to offer a little support, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature. And if you leave a message, you'll not only be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we continue on through the count, but you'll be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and that is always greatly appreciated. Especially recognize at this time of year that there are a lot of things that have your attention, and so we especially appreciate any support as we come into the holiday season. Now currently T-minus 54 minutes, 50 seconds and counting to lift off of this Falcon 9 rocket that you see here on your screen. It's not the only Falcon 9 that SpaceX has upright at the pads here in the U.S. at the moment. Over on the West Coast, there's also a Falcon 9 rocket that's preparing to launch the latest mission on behalf of the United States National Reconnaissance Office, that is NROL 149. That mission getting ready to lift off in the early morning hours, 1:20 a.m. Pacific, 4:20 a.m. Eastern, 0920 UTC is the opening of that launch window. The batch of satellites for the NRO describes that they're proliferated architecture. Satellites believed to be Starshield, the government variant of the Starlink satellites. A little closer to home, you just have to have your eyes gaze over to Historic Launch Complex 39A to see yet another Falcon 9 rocket at the pad awaiting its departure. See a brand new Falcon 9 there at the pad, getting ready to support the O3B mPOWER Satellites 7 and 8 launch. This mission on behalf of Luxembourg-based communications company SES, one of the longest commercial partners in launch for SpaceX. That mission has a launch window that opens up at 3:58 p.m. Eastern. That is 20:58 UTC tomorrow afternoon. So quite a busy time, lots of launches to track, and you can count on Spaceflight now to be with you for every step of the way. So if you haven't already, now's a great time to hit that subscribe button, click the bell icon, turn on notifications. That way you're alerted whenever these launch live streams begin, or we upload new video content to the YouTube channel. I want to extend an appreciation to NASA for the opportunity to talk with a number of folks earlier today in connection with the Artemis program. The 4 members of the Artemis 2 crew were out here at Kennedy, as well as a number of folks involved in the Artemis program, from the Moon to Mars office to folks available to talk about Orion spacecraft, about the core stage of the Space Launch System rocket, the solid rocket boosters, and much more. So now's a great time to subscribe to the channel. Look for some of that video that we shot to make its way onto the channel in the very near future. Coming back to the mission at hand today, as we are looking towards liftoff of this particular Falcon 9 rocket here at Pad 40, let's go ahead and talk about the nominal sequence of events, the countdown timeline, as we are expecting it for this flight. SpaceX takes its poll for the readiness of fueling electronically. Nominally, though, it happens around the T-minus 38-minute mark. If SpaceX is in a good position to do so, they can take the poll early, but again, that's nominally when that poll happens. When the green light is given for prop load, that starts at T-minus 35 minutes with a couple of events. Rocket-grade kerosene, or RP-1, is loaded on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages, and liquid oxygen starts flowing aboard the Falcon 9's first stage. T-minus 30 minutes is when they start loading cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9 first stage. Helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Same will happen on the second stage a few minutes thereafter. T-minus 23 minutes, second stage RP-1 loading concludes. Then at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is when the strong back chill down process begins. It's when SpaceX is conditioning the feed lines at the pad there prior to second stage liquid oxygen load. For those who were with us for the first launch attempt of the RRT-1 mission, you'll recall that this was the point at which we were able to determine that SpaceX had scrubbed the mission. The big vent, which comes up starting at about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds here at Pad 40, did not occur, signaling that SpaceX was not tanking the upper stage of the, or not preparing to tank the upper stage of the Falcon 9 rocket with liquid oxygen. Assuming that does move forward tonight, then that second stage LOX load process begins at the 16-minute mark. T-minus 7 minutes is when the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines gets underway. That process involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, and it helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes out, the first stage kerosene tank is full, and at T-minus 4.5 minutes, the strong back retract sequence begins. That starts with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the strong back, or the transporter erector, will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket and stay in that position until liftoff, at which point it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 3 minutes before launch, the first stage LOX tank is full. Same is true on the second stage, about a minute thereafter. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call that the Falcon 9 is in startup, at that point, the control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch 45 seconds before liftoff. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite, the command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 for a T0 liftoff. At 7:52 p.m. Eastern, 0052 UTC. As we were talking, there was a slight adjustment of, well, with seconds, less than a minute, but for all intents and purposes, from 7:51 to now 7:52. So we were counting down T-minus 48 minutes, 7 seconds and counting. Now T-minus 45 minutes, 47 seconds and counting. Last time we were talking about this launch on Friday, weather was ultimately the issue that scuttled that launch attempt, and heading into it, SpaceX said that weather was about 50% go once we got to the day of launch. Yesterday, which is when the 45th Weather Squadron puts out its launch weather forecast a day ahead of time, they were forecasting a 75% chance of favorable weather at liftoff for a launch opportunity today. booster recovery weather has significantly improved. However, what we are tracking, or what meteorologists are tracking, are cumulus clouds and prevalent liftoff winds, which are tracking between 15 and 22 miles per hour. It's been a dreary day around Florida's Space Coast with off and on rain throughout the late morning heading into the afternoon and early evening. The rain's been tapering off from our vantage point here at the press site, but the clouds are still hanging around a fair amount. If for whatever reason SpaceX decides to pivot to a backup opportunity, weather does deteriorate from the pad perspective, going from a 75% favorable conditions outlook to a 65% scenario. In that turnaround timeline, the liftoff winds drop off as a concern, but the surface electric fields rule does come into place, so issues with lightning. So as we did last go around, we will continue to keep an eye on weather conditions and let you know about any further developments on that front. Now T-minus 41 minutes, 21 seconds and counting. Taking a look at our live chat here. I want to thank a few folks for their support. Thanks to Jacqueline Mazzeo Adams for a $2 super chat. Thank you, Jacqueline. One of our wonderful channel members, Space Pony, with a $2 super chat. Appreciate that, Space Pony. Asking if, assuming that's a typo and you meant Artemis 2 actually flies. I believe it will. I think at this point in time, there's not a good reason to think that it won't. Obviously, there's an incoming administration, and there will be different NASA leadership. Obviously, the ball will be in their court as far as how to approach the Artemis program in the next 4 years and setting the course thereafter. But if you're asking me today, I would say yes, Artemis 2 will fly. Monkey True Rob with a $2 super chat saying, third time's the charm, let's do this. Yeah, it's been at least the one main launch attempt where SpaceX started tanking on Friday, so hopefully weather doesn't put the kibosh on it this time. Channel member Raleigh Nevels with a $2 super chat. Thank you, Raleigh. Mandy J. Hudson also with a $2 super chat. Appreciate you, Mandy. Big thanks to our moderator, Callistia Lee, for a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you, Callistia. Who says, if you haven't already, please show the team some love and support by clicking the like button. They work hard to bring these live streams to us, and we always appreciate the support in return. We're now T-minus 39 minutes, 17 seconds and counting. Coming up on the point at which SpaceX will make the call on the start of prop load. Again, they do take their pull electronically, so if they are in a good position to do so, they may have already done that pull, with fueling set to begin at the T-minus 35-minute mark. As we wait for some activity to happen on the ground, let's take advantage of the fact that we've got some great tracking videographers around the Space Coast and hop on over to our friend P. Carson's with Max Q Productions vantage point of course, one of our favorite gas giants, that being Jupiter, right there at the center of the big box. Got a nice view of the bands around that gas giant. Right now, Pete's lighting is adjusted for the planet itself. If I can call an audible and have him adjust a little bit overexposed for Jupiter, but just so we can see the moons, that's perfect. So if you see the two dots just above and to the right from our vantage point of Jupiter, the one that is closest to the planet from this vantage point, that is Europa. And then just above that is Io. Now the dot that's just near the top of this box right now, that is Ganymede. Of course, you've got two missions from both NASA as well as the European Space Agency, those being the Europa Clipper and the JUICE missions, which are currently making their way to Jupiter as we speak, and going to do some great science and observations once they arrive and really start getting to work around 2030 and 2031 respectively. Europa Clipper, of course, being the most recent Falcon Heavy rocket mission to launch, lifting off from Pad 39A just earlier this year. A little further south out of frame, it's also the Jupiter moon Callisto. Now T-minus 36 minutes, 49 seconds and counting. Bringing it back here down to Earth with the Falcon 9 rocket over at Pad 40. As we await the start of fueling for this Falcon 9 rocket, let's go ahead and take some time to talk about where it's going to be going once it leaves the pad. Let's talk a little trajectory, shall we? Falcon 9, of course, lifting off from Space Launch Complex 40, otherwise known as Slick 40, there at the Cape. Upon liftoff, the Falcon 9 will fly in a northeasterly trajectory with the first stage booster set to touch down on the drone ship, A Shortfall of Gravitas, positioned out in the Atlantic Ocean. The particular booster flying this mission, B-1085, going for flight number 4. We'll talk a little bit more about its booster history as we get closer to the T0 liftoff. If successful as far as the drone ship landing, this will mark the 90th booster landing on A Shortfall of Gravitas and the 383rd booster landing successfully to date. SpaceX will also endeavor to recover the payload fairings as they save about $6 million per recovery effort. They float to the Atlantic Ocean under the support of parachutes. And we're T-minus 35 minutes and counting at this point, assuming SpaceX has given the go-ahead for the start of fueling. Tanking on the Falcon 9 rocket is now underway. Got a great vantage point on the Falcon 9 rocket tonight. Here's what we're looking for, assuming we don't hear word from SpaceX before then about the start of fueling for the Falcon 9. If you look near the base of the rocket, and again, tonight the clarity is really nice, not a lot of heat distortion, a little bit of wind making the camera bounce, but that's okay. Just beneath the X in SpaceX there, you see in that blue lettering, there's a slightly lighter shaded band that runs parallel to the ground. Right around that point is where we start to see a frost line form as the super cold densified liquid oxygen begins flowing aboard the Falcon 9's first stage. Of course, because the warm, humid Florida air is much warmer than the cold LOX, that will start tanking in the rocket. You should also see some vapor in that area, assuming that fueling is now in fact underway. We should start to see some evidence of that. Again, it sort of depends on the clarity of the night, but right around T-minus 30, somewhere between T-minus 33 minutes and 31 minutes is usually when we can see definitively if tanking has begun. Now T-minus 31 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. SpaceX, as I was about to make the call, they've also issued a statement saying that prop load, well, they say prop load is about to begin, but we can see evidence that prop load actually is underway right now. They also say that, quote, teams are keeping an eye on weather ahead of tonight's Falcon 9 launch from Florida. So weather continuing to be a watch item as suggested by the 45th Weather Squadron's launch weather officers. But with tanking now underway, SpaceX is going to at least make a run at it with, again, a T0 liftoff time targeting 7:52 p.m. Eastern. That's 00:52 UTC for our friends joining around the world. Now T-minus 28 minutes, 23 seconds and counting. Taking a look at our live chat, first off, I want to thank the more than 5,400 of you who are joining with us live tonight. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us. Allows more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage, if you'd be so kind. Also want to thank a few folks in the live chat for your support this evening. I want to thank Tropical Gianni for a $5 super chat, who says, watching from Tampa, Florida. Anyone from Tampa Bay area on here? And yeah, if you haven't already, go ahead and sound off in the live chat. Let us know where you're watching tonight's launch from. If you're local in the United States, or even as close as Florida Space Coast, or as far away as the other side of the world, let us know where you're checking in from. It's always great to see where folks are enjoying a launch. Jersey Jen with a $2 super chat with some kind words saying, thank you, Spaceflight Now. We're so fortunate for you. Well, thank you, Jen. Appreciate the kind words and your support, which makes our work possible. Tropical Gianni with a $2 super chat, just offering some support. Thank you. Channel member Josh King marking 26 months as a channel member with us at the pad leader level. Appreciate the ongoing support, Josh, and glad that you're still sticking around with our community here. Now T-minus 26 minutes, 40 seconds and counting. Mentioned that the mission flying tonight from here at Pad 40 will mark the 4th time that this particular Falcon booster will take off and attempt to land. So before it does so, let's go ahead and run through the brief, albeit important, flight history for this booster, B1085. Launching for the first time back on August 20th of this year with a batch of Starlink satellites, Starlink 10-5 to be specific. That was followed up by the launch of the 2-person crew member mission, Crew 9, currently docked to the International Space Station, having lifted off back on September 28th. Nick Hague and Alexander Gorbanov currently docked on board station in their Crew Dragon spacecraft, having just watched the departure of a Cargo Dragon spacecraft from the Earth-facing port of the Harmony module just earlier today. Those two, along with NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams, will be departing aboard that Crew Dragon spacecraft after the arrival of the next crew rotation mission, Crew 10, which is currently set to lift off in the February timeframe. Coming back to this booster history, its last and most recent flight, Starlink 6-77, launching November 7th of this year from this same pad. No T-minus 24 minutes, 56 seconds and counting. Taking a peek at the live chat, want to thank channel member Patty Chichil for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that generosity, Patty. And to our 5 newest channel members, welcome aboard to each and every one of you. We're glad to have you with us. If you haven't already, be sure to thank Patty in the live chat. We hope you decide to stick around with channel membership here at Spaceflight Now. Now T-minus 23 minutes, 2 seconds and counting. Coming upon the big vent here beginning in the next couple of minutes. SpaceX will prepare to chill the feed lines at the pad beginning at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds. And assuming that SpaceX is moving forward with tanking liquid oxygen on board the Falcon 9's second stage. See that big vent at T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds with LOX loads beginning at the 16-minute mark. For those who were not with us for the first launch attempt of this particular Falcon 9 rocket, you may have noticed that just above the inner stage and on the second stage of the Falcon 9 vehicle, there is a gray band that is not always present on a Falcon 9 rocket. As a side-by-side example, we can pull up in just a second pad 39A to give you a juxtaposition in real time, since fortunately SpaceX does have 2 rockets available for us to look back and forth at over here. So if you take a gander over at 39A real quick, you'll notice it's a standard Falcon 9 upper stage, just right from the base of the inner stage up to the payload fairings. Back here at pad 40 does have that gray band, which is a type of thermal protection that is typically seen on missions that require a longer coast phase, and it helps to keep the propellant on board the Falcon 9 upper stage at the correct temperature. If you've taken a look at the countdown time, or the launch timeline, I should say, for this mission, you'll note that the payload deployment is set for T plus 1 hour, 29 minutes, and 21 seconds post liftoff, which is shorter than we would typically see for a mission that bears that type of gray stripe on the upper stage. So still a fair amount that is unknown about this mission, given that SpaceX announced neither the customer for this mission nor the payload on board. We will hopefully learn more as we get through this launch, and of course as we learn more about this mission, we'll be sure to report it out to you all and make it better informed. Now T-minus 20 minutes, 21 seconds and counting, and there goes the start of the big vent, signifying that unlike Friday's launch attempt, SpaceX is conditioning the feed lines now in preparation for a second stage LOX load, and we're just one more step closer to the launch of the RRT-1 mission, coming up in 20 minutes. We're now at T-minus 17 minutes, 36 seconds and counting. Got just about a minute left on this vent before it really tapers off in preparation for the start of second stage LOX load. As we are awaiting that milestone, want to thank Mandy Moon for a super chat. Really appreciate that. And to Michelle Theriault. Apologies, Michelle, if I just butchered your last name there, but thank you for the $5 super chat. Michelle says, shout out to Roland in the control room. So proud of you. Now T-minus 16 minutes, 27 seconds and counting. See, the big vent has wrapped up and second stage LOX load is about to begin less than 20 seconds from now. We're now T-minus 15 minutes and counting. Mentioned the countdown timeline earlier. Let's go ahead and pivot now to the launch timeline. These, of course, is a sequence of events as we're expecting in a nominal flight scenario. SpaceX still targeting a T0 liftoff at 7:52 p.m. Eastern, 00:52 UTC. Falcon 9 will then pass through max Q, or the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle, about a minute and 16 seconds post liftoff. There will then be a sequence of a few events in fairly rapid succession. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, at about T plus 2 minutes and 33 seconds after launch. That'll be followed seconds later by stage separation. Then the ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine on the Falcon 9's second stage. And then presumably somewhere around the 3-minute mark, maybe a little bit further after that, will be the payload fairing jettison. And the reason I'm being a little bit uncertain about that is because SpaceX did not publish a specific time for the payload jettison on this mission. Unclear as to exactly why, but potentially it could be in connection to the payload on board, which again has also not been disclosed by SpaceX or its customer. Moving on down the timeline, T plus 6 minutes and 12 seconds is when the first stage entry burn begins, when 3 Merlin engines at the base of the first stage begin to slow the vehicle down, this burn lasting about 26 seconds in total. That'll set up the first stage landing burn, just one of those Merlin engines kicking back on at, again, 8 minutes 6 seconds post liftoff. Then a little bit of a different sequence here from your typical Starlink launch. We'll see the cutoff of the Merlin vacuum engine, and that'll be followed by the drone ship landing just before the 8.5-minute mark. Following a coast phase of the upper stage of the Falcon 9 rocket, there will be a reignition of that engine at T plus 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 33 seconds. That burn lasting about 47 seconds in total. Then the payload will be deployed at T plus 1 hour, 29 minutes, and 21 seconds after liftoff. Given the nature of this mission and the fact that SpaceX has not disclosed anything prior to liftoff about the payload on board, don't be terribly surprised if we may not see second stage views from the Falcon 9 rocket tonight. Of course, as we get some views from SpaceX as well as mission audio, we may hear a little bit more about the mission tonight, potentially more about the payload, but time will tell. We'll know here in the next few minutes. T-minus 10 minutes and counting. As we are awaiting pad views from SpaceX, let's go ahead and very quickly step through and talk about the Falcon 9 rocket, the workhorse vehicle for SpaceX. It stands 229 feet or 70 meters tall. Has diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Majority of that is made up, of course, by the Falcon 9's first stage, looking for its fourth flight tonight. The base of the Falcon 9 rocket are the 9 Merlin engines, which burn rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment are black carbon fiber landing legs that are used to land the first stage on the drone ship, A Shortfall of Gravitas. Above the first stage is the inner stage. This is a composite structure which consists of an aluminum honeycomb core, which is surrounded by carbon fiber. In the image on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere tail first like a big old dart towards the drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the second stage. In a first stage managed cutoff, high-pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure a clean separation. Also, the second stage engine nozzle is housed safely inside the interstage adapter until stage separation. Speaking of that upper stage of the Falcon 9 powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVAC engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. It produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust. MVAC engine burns the same prop mix, that being RP1 and LOX, same as the first stage. At the top of the stack are the payload fairings, which encapsulate the RRT-1 payload. Payload fairings are carbon composite material standing 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall, 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. Just listening in to the SpaceX commentator, they say weather's holding at about 60% favorability for liftoff tonight. The payload and the rocket are reportedly healthy for this mission. Chill down of the Merlin engines at the base of the Falcon 9 rocket is underway. Taking a quick look at our live chat as we're now T-minus 6 minutes, 14 seconds and counting. I want to thank the nearly 18,000 of you who are joining with us live this evening. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor by clicking the like button. Allows more folks to find their way to this live coverage. Now 6 minutes and counting. At this point, the first stage kerosene tank is full. About a minute and a half away from the strong back retract sequence getting underway. Want to thank a couple of folks for their support in the live chat as well. Our thanks to Jason Grower for a $10 super chat, wishing a huge happy birthday to his dad, John, celebrating with a launch on Spaceflight now. Hopefully we'll have a good candle for you, John, coming up here in less than a minute. Channel member Alicia asking about the payload, which unfortunately has not been disclosed by SpaceX or its customer at this point, so there are indications of what it may be, but nothing official has been announced at this point in time. Appreciate Ryan Ham for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership as we're just about to see strong back retract here. As a quick point of note, you'll notice our countdown clock in the upper right-hand corner of the screen is slightly different than what you're seeing in the big box from SpaceX. Reason being, our clock is in real time, and what we're seeing from SpaceX is coming in on a slight delay. So while we still have our tracking camera views, we'll be making those callouts in real time. Seeing those clamp arms opening up just beneath the payload fairings. We're coming upon the conclusion of first stage liquid oxygen load wrapping up. I want to thank Andrew Lewis for a $5 super chat saying, my kids Jackson, Brooks, Bronson, and Micah all geared up and ready to go, watching us from Jacksonville, Florida. Thanks for checking in, Andrew.
The white clouds you see.
Heard the call for stage 1 LOX load. Now waiting for stage 2 to ramp up here Here the call for stage 2 locks up being complete. You're seeing the ground gas closeouts there as they remove any remaining locks from the feed lines there. Now about a minute and a half before a liftoff. As we're just about a minute before liftoff, we'll go ahead and keep our focus on the rocket. Come back to the live chat on the other side of liftoff. T-minus 1 minute and counting.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Good call for vehicle being in startup. Countdown is being handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, waiting for the go for launch call.
Go for launch.
And with that, we are now less than 30 seconds away from the launch of this Falcon 9 rocket from pad 40. 20 seconds. 15 seconds. And here we go. In 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the RRT-1 mission. Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. Now a little more than a minute into flight. Great work by our tracking team. Falcon 9 now traveling faster than the speed of sound, approaching max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Call for max Q. Coming upon 3 events in fairly rapid succession here. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, at about T plus 2 minutes and 33 seconds, followed seconds later by stage separation, and then the ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine. Beautiful view of the Falcon 9 rocket as it continues its descent. We're about 10 seconds away from MECO. There you see MECO. Stage separation. And ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine.
Main engine cutoff. Stage separation confirmed. And back ignition.
Good callouts, good onboard camera views from SpaceX. Once again, though, they are not providing upper stage views of the Falcon 9 rocket at the request of the customer tonight. which is why we're not seeing the upper stage and the Merlin vacuum engine at this point. Standing by for fairing separation there. You see the payload fairings go. About 3 minutes and 37 seconds.
Bearing separation confirmed.
Hear that good call from SpaceX. Now coming up on 4 minutes into flight, still great views of the Merlin vacuum engine. SpaceX says they will use the recovery vessel Doug to scoop up the fairing halves out of the Atlantic Ocean once they splash down under the support of parachutes. Doug is one of the recovery vessels that SpaceX has here on the East Coast, named after former NASA astronaut Doug Hurley, one of the 2 astronauts who flew the Demo 2 mission, kicking off the first crewed flight under the Commercial Crew Program back in May of 2020. Now 5 minutes into flight. We're just about a minute away from the start of the first stage entry burn, when again SpaceX will use 3 of the Merlin engines on the base of the Falcon 9 first stage to begin to slow down the booster as it makes its way towards the drone ship, A Shortfall of Gravitas. Split screen you're seeing here on the left, those are our tracking camera views. This particular shot right this moment from our friend Pete Carstens with Max Q Productions. The box on your right from the onboard cameras from the Falcon 9 first stage. Taking a look now pointed down. It's kind of grainy. Obviously, the Falcon 9 is flying under darkness right now. You can see occasional puffs in between the hypersonic grid fins on the Falcon 9's first stage. Those are the cold gas thrusters helping to adjust the attitude of the vehicle or its positioning as it makes its way down towards the drone ship. Entry burn set to begin now here. It's happening in real time. Got a view of it from Pete. Well done, Pete. Entry burn now wrapped up in real time. Still seeing it come through on a slight delay from SpaceX. At the conclusion of the entry burn from the onboard camera's perspective, we're now 7 minutes into flight in real time. Coming up, the next milestone that we're tracking here on the mission will be the start of the landing burn, coming up at T+8 minutes and 6 seconds. That'll be followed 4 seconds after that by the cutoff of the Merlin vacuum engine on the Falcon 9's second stage. This booster, B-1085, set to touch down on the drone ship A Shortfall of Gravitas at about T+8 minutes and 29 seconds into the mission. And again, the clock that you want to pay attention to as far as what we'll be seeing visually will be the time at the bottom center of your screen, since we're at this point in the flight relying on SpaceX's onboard camera views. call the flight termination system on the upper stage has been saved. You see the ignition of the booster's engine for the landing burn. Seco 1 will have happened just now. And a good one landing of this booster with it looks like a nice view of the moon in the background there. Very picturesque landing. View inside SpaceX HQ in Hawthorne, California. Looks like in the reflection of the windows in the background, like they've still got some Christmas lights maybe around one of the monitors in the front of the room. A little hard to tell. Actually, it looks like those are on the desk just beyond the window. Actually, now let's take a closer look at it. Again, SpaceX not providing upper stage views of the Falcon 9 rocket at the request of their customer tonight. As far as the timeline for the rest of the mission and when we should expect to hear word of deployment, the upper stage engine, the Merlin vacuum engine, will have one more burn before advertised payload deployment. That burn beginning at T+1 hour, 3 minutes and 33 seconds, lasting a little less than a minute, setting up the payload to be deployed at T+1 hour, 29 minutes and 21 seconds post-launch. With a good liftoff and landing of the booster, we'll turn to our mission stats here in just a minute. But first off, want to just remind folks that we do have another 2 launches that we are tracking for you. One in the overnight hours, one tomorrow afternoon. So if you haven't subscribed to Spaceflight now, turn on the notifications. Now's a great time to do so. We're watching for the launch of NROL 149 coming up, with a window that opens at 1:20 a.m. Pacific, 4:20 a.m. Eastern, 09:20 UTC. Again, that is a batch of satellites for the NRO's so-called proliferated architecture, believed to be Starshield satellites, the government variant of Starlink satellites. That mission will be followed later on in the day in more sensible daylight hours for us here locally at this pad right here. This is Launch Complex 39A, of course, here at the Kennedy Space Center. A pair of satellites, the O3B mPOWER variety, will launch on behalf of Luxembourg-based SES, heading up to a medium Earth orbit. This mission set to launch with a window that opens up at 3:58 p.m. Eastern, 20:58 UTC. That rocket going upright at the pad earlier on in the afternoon, well within the amount of time it would take between going upright and launch. So weather notwithstanding, things seem to appear to be on pace for this launch tomorrow. That being said, of course, the 45th Weather Squadron did issue their launch weather forecast for this mission, suggesting that there is just a 55% chance of favorable weather at liftoff for this launch, citing concerns for the cumulus cloud rule and the surface electric fields rule that exists both tomorrow as well as in a 24-hour backup scenario here at 39A. Liftoff winds for both days trending between 12 and 17 miles per hour, so shouldn't be too terribly gusty as far as launch constraint is concerned. Before you turn away, we did get some great photography from our team here, as you saw, with the tracking views, but also had a great lunar transit shot from our photographer, Michael Kane. So we're working to bring that to you in just a moment here. As we're getting that up, take a quick look at the live chat. I know there were a number of folks who have been supporting during the course of our launch coverage. Again, this from our photographer, Michael Kane. A great shot of the Falcon 9 as it was making its ascent from Florida's Space Coast, just next to the practically full moon here tonight. Well done, Michael. Want to thank channel member Patty Chichil, just turning back to the live chat here. Thanks for a $5 super chat and a touching note saying this is a memory of my dad 32 years ago. He left this earth for the heavens. Love you and miss you, Pop. Keeping some kind thoughts for you, Patty. Space Coast Adventures, been a channel member with us for now 2 months, saying, watching from my balcony in Cape Canaveral. Thanks for ongoing support, Space Coast Adventures. I hope you got some good views of the Falcon 9 from your balcony. Sounds like a fun view. Michelle Theriault, again, apologize, Michelle, if I'm mispronouncing your last name there. But thanks for the $5 super chat, who says, congrats for another awesome launch. Chris, Tim, Ryan, Dennis, sorry if I forgot anyone, she says. Wagner with a, looks like a 2,000 yen super chat. Thank you so much for that. And a 200 yen super chat as well. Appreciate that additional support. Darren P with a $5 Canadian super chat, checking in from Vancouver, Canada. Tornadoes Gaming 234, marking 1 month with us as a channel member. Glad to have you with us, Tornadoes. Says 1 month milestone. Let's go. I think I can't see this one. It's a little cloudy as heck from wherever Tornadoes is watching from. Hopefully it wasn't too bad when all was said and done. Channel member D Fox with a $10 super chat. Thank you so much, D. Really appreciate that. Asking if anyone has ever attempted to use a drone to record SpaceX rocket passing by at top speed. Well, both Cape Canaveral Space Force Station and the Kennedy Space Center are both no drone areas, so it is not permitted for anyone to fly a drone here without explicit permission from one of those two federal bodies. What you'll see more typically, especially when it comes to the crewed missions, is you'll see NASA fly its helicopter, and it uses a camera on board that chopper to capture views of either the Falcon 9 rocket when it launches Crew Dragon, or what we saw earlier this year when ULA's Atlas rocket launched the Starliner spacecraft. Joni Mahoney, channel member, with a $2 super chat. Thank you, Joni, who says, great job as always. Thank you, Spaceflight Now. Thank you for your support. And Rick Donner, marking 13 months as a channel member at the launch director level, saying, always a pleasure, Will, and mod team. Thank you, Rick. Appreciate your ongoing support. As promised, now return to the mission stats as they currently stand with a good liftoff and landing of the Falcon 9 first stage booster. And of course, we'll continue to track the mission as it continues on and let you know about further updates when we get news of payload deployment. You can see the strong back coming up at the pad. SpaceX's process for turning around this workhorse pad as quickly as possible. This mission marked the 410th Falcon 9 rocket launch to date, the 125th Falcon 9 launch of 2024. This was the 354th Falcon booster reflight, with a launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was SpaceX's 127th orbital launch of the year, including 2 Falcon Heavy missions. This was the 132nd SpaceX orbital launch within the last 365 days, the 223rd orbital launch for SpaceX from Pad 40, and the 277th overall orbital launch from this pad as well. Little typo there on the date, but as of today, the 16th of December, this is where SpaceX stands as far as the bar chart is concerned, looking at launches from this year and back in time to 2010. Moving on to some recovery stats, this was the 90th booster landing successfully on the drone ship A Shortfall of Gravitas. That marked the 304th successful SpaceX drone ship landing and the 383rd overall orbital booster landing. Finally, with some industry stats, this was the 89th orbital launch from the Sunshine State, marking the 134th orbital launch from U.S. soil, the 146th orbital launch from a U.S. rocket company, and the 243rd orbital launch attempt from around the globe. 6 launch failures on the year. Here's where the pie chart currently stands. You'll notice that China now stands at 65 launches on the year, now holding 27% of the pie, the most it's had since we've been tracking this year, I believe. Having launched twice today. For those keeping track of what's going on down in New Zealand, you may have been expecting the launch of their latest mission. However, poor weather is causing them to push that back a little bit by a couple of days. So now look for the Electron rocket to launch the mission they nicknamed Owl the Way Up on behalf of Japanese Earth observation company Synspective. It's launching locally on the 20th from Eastern Standard Time on the 19th. And that will go ahead and do it for our live launch coverage of this particular Falcon 9 mission. Again, we've got a couple more that we're tracking in the overnight hours here. Of course, the one from Vandenberg's NROL 149 in the overnight hours, as well as O3B Power 7 and 8 from Pad 40 tomorrow afternoon. Last but not least, we hope to bring you more on this mission in the coming hours post-launch, especially post-deployment. So be sure to keep an eye on our website, spaceflightnow.com, as well as our social channels, and we'll bring you any further updates as we learn them. Want to thank our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images and Pete Carsons with Max Key Productions for helping to provide tracking support of this mission tonight. A thanks to our photographers Adam Bernstein and Michael Kane for their photography of tonight's launch. You can find them over on X. Michael is at MD Kane Jr., Adam at ABurnNYC. Be sure to follow Spaceflight Now, simply at Spaceflight Now. You can find us on X, Blue Sky, Threads, and Facebook. Our thanks to our wonderful moderators in the live chat. Callistia Lee, Aussie Space Girl, as well as Astro Joe. Realized there were a couple more live chats that popped in as soon as I looked away. Speaking of Callistia Lee, thanks for a $10 super chat saying shout out to Addie for James. Todd E with a $10 super chat as well, saying my dad worked for a company called TRW working on satellites. He passed a couple of years back, but I know he would have loved this. He would have tripped out seeing a rocket getting caught on a landing. Believe Stephen just letting me know that that company built the TDRS satellites, which help communicate with missions beyond Earth, a very important satellite system for NASA and its international partners and the commercial customers that it works with. Rob Hammonds with a $10 super chat, hoping for peace in the world for Christmas. Always a good aspiration. And Chuck Close with a $25 super chat, closing us out. Very apt. I want to thank our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of the broadcast tonight. Most importantly, thanks to you for wherever you've been watching this live launch coverage from. Again, there's lots more to cover, and we hope you stick around with us. Come right on back here to the YouTube channel for more live launch coverage over the next 24 hours. Going to be a busy day for us here at the team. Again, look for the next Florida-based launch right there at Pad 39A. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others. We will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.